Go ahead.
Okay, we're ready to go. This is really exciting to have so many folks here today, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jen Walling, the Executive Director of the Illinois Environmental Council. I know many of you have worked with us before, and you know that since 1975, IEC has been building power for people in the environment here in Illinois. We really appreciate you gathering with our team here today for what I know will be an extremely productive conversation about our shared path forward during the upcoming second Trump administration. We've already seen the damage done to environmental regulations and our democratic systems during Trump's first term. He and his campaign surrogates have been crystal clear about their intentions to further dismantle foundational environmental protections. How successful they will be in that endeavor remains to be seen, but we will be doing all that we can to make it as difficult as possible for them to do so. The work ahead is going to require all hands on deck to ensure we continue to make progress on climate and protect our environment here at home in Illinois. IEC is committed to that work and will also continue to educate our elected leaders, grow our movement, and pass strong, equitable environmental policies to ensure Illinois remains a beacon of democracy and environmental progress. And that's what brings us here today. I am thrilled by the panel that has volunteered so quickly to be a part of this. We're first going to hear from our new IEPA Director, James Jennings, who's going to speak about the state level work and preparations that IEPA is thinking about. Next, we'll hear from Angela Tovar, who is our Chief Sustainability Officer and the Commissioner on the Department of Environment for the City of Chicago. I hope her work will also be an example for many of you in other municipalities of things that we can do. And then we have our friends and national partners. IEC is the state partner of the League of Conservation Voters, and we have Sarah Schifo from League of Conservation Voters to give some national context. And then we have Angela Shu from our staff who's going to talk about some specifics related to the Inflation Reduction Act and what we need to think about. But we're thinking about the broad range of how this impacts all of our issue areas, and we're going to give some concrete ways to get involved as well. There will be time for your questions. Please submit them via the Q&A portal at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll get to as many as possible. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Director Jennings.
Yeah, thanks, Jen, and good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate everybody coming on to hear some of the work that the state has been doing and what we'll continue to do going forward. I mean, ultimately, the IEPA, like all public agencies, is a service organization, and we have three entities to whom we owe significant responsibilities. Ultimately, we owe the public the service of ensuring that every decision that our staff make at any level arcs toward ensuring the most protective standards are developed, implemented, and when necessary, enforced using the most recent science that is available to us. That's something that is a bedrock principle of how we've historically operated, and it's something that continues to be the case going forward, irrespective of who is in the White House, who is in this seat, and who's doing the program work at our frontline levels. I mean, in addition to that, we're responsible to ensuring that the entities that we regulate have a clear understanding of what our expectations are. And the two ways that we convey that are through being very transparent about our regulatory expectations as well as through permitting transactions. And I mean, we're also responsible for serving our staff. One of the things I know that Jen has been very vocal about in the past has been what our staffing population is. And we've been fortunate in recent years to dramatically grow our staff. We have increased our staff since the pandemic over almost a third. And that's work that we anticipate continuing to do and ensuring that they have all of the resources that are needed to be able to execute their job duties to the full extent that they are capable. Also, as was the case 10 days ago and as is now, what's unique about state government is that 95% of the environmental work done nationally is implemented directly by the states. And in Illinois, where we are very uniquely situated, is that unlike many other states in the nation, we don't have cross references to the relevant federal authorities that govern our air, water, and land programs. And so, to that end, independent of anything that were ever to happen at the federal level, we have a foundation in state law that establishes a series of highly protective clean air, clean water, and waste programs to ensure that the people of Illinois are protected across the board. That's something that hasn't changed. Prior to the election and going forward, I mean, we have a very ambitious regulatory agenda, which includes strengthening some of those regulations, both the NOx air regulations as well as the PFAS groundwater standards were things that we'd proposed previously based on the science that was available and will be continuing to go forward with. What that means is that unlike other states that may have to go back and forth with the federal government, how their programs will be running, we have programs that by virtue of state regulation will continue to be among the most protective in the country. In addition to that, one of our bedrock principles is to ensure that we maximize the funds that are provided to us. Unlike many other states, Illinois has always historically had and will continue to have a robustly financed state revolving fund, which is used to support the significant water infrastructure needs of the state. While other states have often had to seek additional federal money, and we have also availed ourselves of that, we do have a wide variety of resources that are and will continue to be available to support the billions of dollars over the next few decades of water infrastructure enhancements that are needed. Beyond that, and much to the credit of Jen and some of our other partners, we have one of the most ambitious climate plans in the country. This was true prior to last week and will continue to be true in that we have statutory obligations to ensure that Illinois decarbonizes the power sector, that we provide ample resources for electrification across the transportation sector. And those are things that we will be continuing to do, irrespective of what were to happen to some of our potential federal resources. We actively have been working with US EPA over the past 4 years to secure as much federal funding as possible. This has been one of the governor's primary objectives for all executive agencies. And we've been fortunate to receive over $500 million in federal money to be able to start programs that we'll now be able to handle largely on our own. We've been in continued discussions with US EPA on how to ensure that any federal funding that is forthcoming or that has not been spent will be utilized. But as we sit here right now, the ambitious objectives of our climate pollution reduction grant, as well as our electric vehicle programs, will be continue to go forward as we had planned prior to the events of last week. One of the things that is very important, though, that we would want that the agency would reiterate is that, again, irrespective of any activity at the federal level, the state of Illinois has taken action on many items like environmental justice that are handled independently of federal authority. As a matter of state policy, the IEPA has adopted an environmental justice and community enforcement strategy, a public participation plan that is targeted to ensure that communities have a meaningful voice in permitting transactions that would impact them, as well as a language access plan that is designed to ensure that Illinois residents, irrespective of their primary language spoken at home, have an opportunity to receive information regarding our work, understand it, and then participate in the public participation processes that allow their voice to be heard. These are all creatures of state law and state policy. They're things that we have been working on independent of any federal activity, and they're programs that will continue to exist and will continue to flourish regardless of the type of direction that you might see at the national level. And so, I mean, I do, consistent with the guidance that Jen had given us at the outset, I want to make sure that I'm being brief so that there's ample time for questions at the end. But as a general matter, the IEPA has a very ambitious agenda that we foresee going forward on the regulatory front to ensure that we continue to have the most protective environmental standards in place in the Midwest and in the country, and that we have the most robust environmental justice programs that we can, given the combination of our program staff and the needs of the state. That was true 2 weeks ago. That was going to be true no matter what happened in the election, and that'll continue to be true. And particularly those public participation tools, I mean, I look forward to us being able to deploy those in a way that ensures that those of you who are on this call, as well as others who weren't able to make it, have an opportunity to weigh in on what I'm sure will be a very active regulatory and legislative session going forward. And so, yeah, Jen, I will turn it back over to you.
Right, and I'm sure we will get additional questions, so definitely feel free to put those in the Q&A, and we're going to take them at the end. So really appreciate that. And Director, just really appreciate your work and looking out for the state. I know we're thinking about how to be proactive together, and there is a lot of appreciation there. So thank you. I now want to turn it over to Angela Tovar, who is both the Chief Sustainability Officer and our first in a while Commissioner at the Department of Environment in the City of Chicago. Really grateful for her, hopping on here last minute and talking about what Chicago is thinking about and the way that Chicago is leading on the environment. So thank you, Angela.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen. It's my pleasure to be on this call with you all. I know you all are maybe feeling the same way. It's just so critical for us to just remain in community and to make sure that we are working on a coordinated effort. I think that the partnership between the state and the city becomes even more critical at this juncture. James and I are already working colleagues and work together on a number of different things. But really solidifying that partnership between the city and state and ensuring that we're aligned on all fronts, it becomes even more critical more than ever. And the work right at the city and state level are more critical than ever. So we are certainly thinking about ways in which we can fortify our policies and our programs to make sure that they remain in place. Some of those questions, those outstanding questions, I won't have for you today because those are things that we are working through with our legal team, really understanding what protections that we have at the state level and of course the city level, making sure that we're asking questions where, where federal law maybe preempts home rule authority. That's going to be an important question as we think about all of these protections. But those are certainly things that are on our mind. And I want to reassure folks that, those conversations are front and center at the city. What I could maybe do is just talk about some of the threats that we are thinking about. And I'll just give the distinction, the IEPA, of course, is a regulatory authority. The Department of Environment currently is not the regulatory authority on environment for the city. That function still remains as is in place in previous years, at least since 2011 at the Chicago Department of Public Health. But the Chief Sustainability Officer role and the broader Department of Environment right now leads on climate and environmental justice programs and policies. And so that is the perspective that I'll be speaking about our role today. So, as we think about the threats here in the city, it certainly, we are thinking about a number of things and how, the outcome of the election will impact our efforts to mitigate climate threats. We think about how this may impact our abilities to advance our clean energy priorities. And then, of course, as we have deeply invested in our environmental justice initiatives here at the City of Chicago, we think about how the need to ensure that we can maintain protection for vulnerable communities. As you all have already heard, and just some of the things that we've heard in terms of the election rhetoric and promises that President Trump has made, we understand his clear desire to think about federal climate policy, as he thinks about federal climate policy, to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, right? We understand his desire to ease some of the restrictions on oil drilling, and we understand that he wants to rescind all unspent Inflation Reduction Act dollars, right? So that is a real threat as we think about our ability to move some of these programs and policies forward in the future. But again, we see that as an opportunity to really, really fortify and strengthen our climate policies and our partnerships at the city level so that we can maintain our progress. And I do want to give you just some of the things at the city level that we see in terms of protections and opportunities. I know that, James has already mentioned CEJA. CEJA is an important, ambitious target for us as well as the city. We mirror that commitment both to our own transition to 100% and to upholding our commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement. We are in fact using CEJA guidelines as we are, advancing the city's transition to 100% renewable energy for our city operations, which will come into place on January 1, 2025. There is a provision in CEJA that allows for utility scale development, which is something that we're involved in through this project, and to uphold both state equity and labor standards. And so we will be adhering to the state guidelines for that. So we know CEJA works. It's an important, robust policy that gives guidelines and directions in terms of renewable energy deployment, in terms of robust climate goals, and of course, and more importantly, federal, state investments in you know, our climate priorities. These are all things that we support and want to make sure remain. I know that James mentioned the federal funding that the state was awarded through the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. There are programs that will be rolling out to advance decarbonization for things like public housing, for industrial decarbonization, for agriculture decarbonization, and freight emissions reduction. That is critical, even though we are not, you know, the state will be leading on that project. We, of course, are already in conversations with the state energy advisor, J.C. Kibbe, as well as the EPA, to think about shovel-ready projects, not only within the city limits, but also across the collar counties as well, right? Many of our collar counties have already done climate plans that were funded through CPRG funding. And so through those efforts, you know, there is a long list of projects that we know are ready to go, and understanding how they may be awarded through the state CPRG funds will be critical. And so we're looking forward to supporting the state and ensuring that we are connecting the dots to the right, you know, projects throughout both the city and then across the collar counties as well. You know, similarly with the state allocation for the home energy rebate dollars, which is $263 million. That pot of funding for us is critical. We are want to make sure, again, as we think about home decarbonization and the opportunity to really drastically lower our greenhouse gas emissions and our reduction and our reliance on fossil fuels, that we're able to tap into that pot of money, that we're supporting the state in the successful implementation of those dollars as well. So those are, you know, our commitments to the state. At the city level, of course, you know, I know James has already talked about water regulation. That's research that we're doing on our end to make sure that our safety standards are protected, and that we can confirm and that we have the ability to remain in compliance with the standards as they are today, and that any rollbacks won't impact our city's drinking water. I want to also mention that the city of Chicago has a robust energy code. We passed the Energy Transformation Code in 2023, which focused on exceeding the International Energy Code standards, which means that buildings now are focused on reducing, you know, new construction in buildings that adhere to the new code are focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions consistent with the city's climate action plan. The code is designed to save energy and to reduce our carbon footprint, and that it applies to both residential and commercial buildings. So something that's worth noting in terms of our commitment. We have also, at the city level, been successful in obtaining some IRA funding that will already be put into place. So, you know, of course, there are no guarantees in this moment, but we are confident and have every reason to believe that the funding that has been awarded to the city through the Inflation Reduction Act, because, you know, we have signed some of these grant agreements, we are confident that this money will remain in place. We did have $3 million that was allocated to us through state formula funds, through IDNR, for our community forestry program, so that the city can continue to make progress. We have Our Root Chicago, which is our tree equity initiative. And through that effort, we will be conducting a tree inventory so that we can continue that progress moving forward to ensure that the city has a robust tree canopy. We have also been awarded $2.3 million for energy efficiency conservation block grant funding, and that is going to support our fleet electrification work, as well as some municipal energy audits and building retrofits as well as our work to expand to a broader community energy planning. We also were awarded $15 million through CDOT for the US DOT's Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program. That is going to support our public electric vehicle charging pilot program to expand resources for public charging through an equity lens across the city. And then something that is a work in progress related to Inflation Reduction Act is that the city is in the process of pursuing direct pay. So that is the tax rebate that would traditionally not be available to municipalities and nonprofit organizations because we don't pay taxes. Through changes in the tax code, direct pay allowed for those entities to pursue these rebates. And that is something that we are in the process of obtaining for the city. So as we've committed to our own fleet electrification and clean energy investments on our own building assets, we are pretty confident that at least this first round of funding will be able to be processed and that the city will be able to obtain some funding back so we can continue our progress on those two efforts. And lastly, I'll mention that we are in the process of and are awaiting a notification from the US DOE on a building energy codes grant. So building off of the momentum from the state energy from the city's energy code transformation, as well as programs that we already have in place, like benchmarking. We want to continue to advance decarbonization and thinking about existing buildings and how we could use our code to accelerate progress on lowering our emissions. So that is the one outstanding grant that we are hoping that we will hear back from the DOE soon, and that we can put that program in place. As you all may know, even though some of these things are immediate threats, I think what we're learning as we're digging more into details, some of these will require congressional action. This will not just be something that will, these changes, are not something that the president can just do through executive action. It does require, particularly with the tax code and some of these other IRA funding resources, it will require some congressional action in order to repeal these. And so, we're hoping that this is a slow process, if that is a real threat, and that, we will at the very least be able to, draw down these last awards before that change happens, if it happens at all. And then two final things that I just want to mention. One, as some of you may already know, the city a couple of years back made a $188 million investment in climate and environmental justice priorities through the Chicago Recovery Plan. That is city funded, many of those projects, including Space to Go, which is our resilient schoolyards retrofit program that we do in partnership with Chicago Public Schools and MWRD and the Department of Water Management. That still remains in place. The city is launching our 1 to 4 family decarbonization retrofit program called Green Homes Chicago. That had already been announced, but we are expecting to fully launch that program, and that will be fully funded for many years. We have programs within that pot of funding like Bike Chicago, which has provided both bike and safety equipment and lessons to low-income Chicagoans to advance micromobility options. And I believe that I already mentioned our fleet electrification work, which we're converting the city's fleet to all electric vehicles and are expanding our network of charging ports at our fleet yards. And we've already converted 23% of our vehicles to date. So we're really excited about that program and about our progress on that program and all of these programs, and we'll continue to ensure that we find a path forward. And I will my final mention that I really want to talk about quickly is, again, just going back to the note that we need to fortify our commitments here. You all may recall that in 2021, the city passed an air quality zoning ordinance, which required at the time of zoning that any new industrial developments or any new intensive uses will have to require a air and transportation assessment in order to move forward. We have thought over the years more expansively about how we can incorporate other indicators to identify the cumulative impacts of pollution across neighborhoods. You all may also recall that included a report that identified areas of concern across the city. And we remain committed to advancing a cumulative impacts ordinance. Again, we have to think about those local safeguards where we can put policies in place to make sure that we are continuing to protect the health and safety of our residents. So that is still very much on the table and something that we are committed to doing. And then similarly, as we've made such tremendous progress on decarbonization, we remained committed to also ensuring that the Clean and Affordable Buildings Ordinance moves forward in the coming year. So just wanted to end by, reassuring you that our commitments are unwavering and that we'll continue to work with many people here today to ensure that we can move these policies and programs forward. So thank you for your partnership.
Thank you, Angela. The work you're doing is amazing, and we're so thrilled. That was a lot of great information that I know is personally making me feel some optimism. And we're getting some great questions. We're going to answer them at the end, but I'm going to hand it over to Sarah Chifo now from League of Conservation Voters, who is doing League of Conservation Voters. It's the best national partner, but they also have been doing just some amazing work this year. And of course, not the results we wanted, but we're ready to move ahead. So I'm going to pass it to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Jen. Again, I'm Sarah Chifo. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs of the League of Conservation Voters. I've been here on staff for 15 years, and so I have some years of perspective on how the pendulum swings in our politics and the work we have cut out for us in the upcoming Trump-Vance administration. So like IEC, LCV builds political power for people and the planet. I want to ground the remarks I'm going to make in our vision, which, as you heard from Commissioner Tovar, is all the more important in the reality we face in this country. So we're working to build a world in which tackling the climate crisis, confronting environmental injustice, and strengthening our democracy lead to cleaner and healthier communities, good, well-paying union jobs, and a just, equitable, and sustainable future for all. Nothing about last Tuesday's election results changed that, and we are more committed than ever to bring this shared vision to reality. It's an honor to be with you all. I know you all have very busy schedules, and so I want to thank you for taking your time to be part of this Lunch and Learn session. So a few reflections before I go into kind of the state of play of how we're preparing for a Trump-Vance administration. The election, no doubt, the results are deeply disturbing, disappointing. We have a lot of hard lessons to learn as a country from them. They have profound implications for climate action and for environmental protection. But I want to underscore this election was not about climate action. It was not about protecting clean air and clean water for all. Those investments we've made in climate action, clean energy, cleaning up pollution, and creating good jobs remain extremely popular. And in states where we campaigned the most, the swing to Trump was half of what it was in uncontested non-battleground states. And in all but one battleground state, the pro-environment Senate candidates won. So I think, the takeaway here is that clean energy and climate transition is here, and it's here to stay. And it's all the more important that we're working really deeply in partnership to bring about that change. So yes, our work ahead is hard. We have our work cut out for us. We have to remain committed to fighting for environmental justice and a more equitable society. And state action was always going to be critical in any electoral outcome, and it is all the more important in the reality that we face here in Washington, D.C. with a very likely Republican trifecta. I'm incredibly grateful and inspired by the state and local leaders, Director Jennings, Commissioner Tovar. Thank you for your remarks. I'm taking inspiration, and just to Jen and the team in IEC, the coalition, the powerhouse you've built. Thank you for being such a trailblazer for all of the state affiliates in the LCV CVM family. So I'm going to touch on 3 topics pretty quickly, make sure that we have plenty of time for questions and answers. So first topic I'm going to cover is how we're maximizing progress with the remainder of the Biden-Harris term. Second topic is what we're preparing for with the Trump-Vance administration and what lessons we can take from Trump 1. And then third is how we need to work in partnership to really ensure that the investments we've made at the federal level don't get gutted and clawed back and repealed. So on the first topic on maximizing progress, we have 70 or so days left for the Biden-Harris administration, and LCV is working with partners in the climate, environmental justice, and labor communities to ensure that we maximize the progress in that time. We're focused on finishing rules that are critical to protecting public health, especially in environmental justice communities. Very focused on IEPA's national counterpart in the Environmental Protection Agency, getting out final rules and key guidances that also strengthen the record for making progress on climate and clean air. One example of this continued progress was just yesterday when the Environmental Protection Agency finalized its methane waste emission fee that was passed as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Second big area we're working with the Biden-Harris administration on and are continuing to go full steam ahead is trying to stop and slow the build out of fossil fuels, specifically pressuring the Department of Energy to reject massive LNG export projects like the Calcasieu Pass 2 project down in the Gulf, and also working with them to publish strong updated studies that fully take into account the climate, environmental justice, and economic impacts of unfettered LNG exports. We're also working on, as was alluded to earlier, making sure that this administration, which they are going full steam ahead, is getting out the dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law to make sure that they are obligated and contractually signed so that makes it harder to claw back those investments, as Commissioner Tovar said. We're also working to protect public special places, I should say, using the presidential authority to protect and designate national monuments and other conservation actions. We're also working hand in glove with allies in the Senate to confirm as many judicial vacancies as humanly possible before January 3rd. And then finally, we're also working with partners across the good government kind of movement and making sure that we're having the Biden-Harris administration download, publish, archive as much data as possible, knowing that the Trump-Vance administration will try to wipe some of that away and make it harder for us. We're very into energy efficiency here, so I'm going to have my lights turned back on. And then, of course, we're working to make sure that that we are working with allies in the labor movement and beyond to protect career employees who we know Trump has said he will go after as one of his first orders of business. So that's what we're focused on, laser focused in the next 70 days. We're also laser focused on building our strength and our strategy to fight back against what assault is coming from the Trump and Vance administration. So within the progressive and environmental communities, we have a 4-pronged strategy coming together, which is sort of shorthanded as states, streets, suites, and courts. This includes a major effort to advance climate progress at the state and local level. You've heard that already very passionately here. Second is mass mobilization of public support against the radical overreach we know the Trump-Vance administration will seek to pursue. Third is holding corporations accountable to take more action on climate and also pressure the laggard corporations. And then fourth is a significant effort to fight Trump in the courts. And of course, the states and the attorneys general are core partners in that. Now, as you heard earlier, President-elect Trump and Project 2025 have made crystal clear that they're waging an outright war on climate, on science, and on our progress. A few lowlights just to refresh everybody. Trump has vowed to be a dictator on day one, to greatly expand drilling. He's also committed to abandoning international climate agreements, repeal federal climate regulations, try to eviscerate the Inflation Reduction Act's climate and clean energy investments, committed to slashing environmental agency budgets, to pushing out and undermining career staff, and even gutting the EPA's very authority to tackle climate change. Now, thankfully, he can't do all this alone and needs congressional cooperation for a lot of this agenda. They've also committed to rolling back critical public health and environmental justice programs, including going after regulations on pesticides that are really deadly and harmful for families that are exposed, and forever chemicals like PFAS, and even eliminating the Environmental Protection Agency's environmental justice initiatives and infrastructure, and even attacking scientific advisory boards and stacking those with industry insiders and hacks. So we're preparing with eyes wide open for a second Trump term to be even more extreme and dangerous than the first term was, when he rolled back over 100 environmental rules. We believe they are more prepared. We believe they learned from kind of rushed and sloppy work to repeal progress under their first term. And then we know that they're working with a more sympathetic judiciary. So again, we have our work cut out for us, but we're going to be working with partners in the states, in Congress, and in organizations across the progressive movement and the existing clean energy industry to draw a stark contrast between a true vision for bettering people's lives and what we believe extreme MAGA Republicans are going to be prioritizing and doing polluter allies bidding. We also have our eyes squarely on the 2026 midterms and taking the case to the public and to voters. We're also going to be working very closely with blue states, governors, attorney generals, and others to push back on Trump, and reflecting on what the years of Trump's first administration looked like. When we had bedrock attacks on clean air, clean water, public health, those attacks really broke through with the public. And so we're trying to be very thoughtful about the fights that we pick. We're very worried about Trump and allies in Congress going after small community-based environmental justice organizations that have received federal funding. We need to be standing by those partners and allies and supporting them against what will be really vicious attacks. And then we also have to fight back in a way that connects with people where they are and lifts up communities, builds political power, and helps answer the problems that far too many Americans are still struggling with in terms of making ends meet and being able to put food on the table for their families. So we have our work cut out for us, as I said, but I am excited that we can build a winning campaign to protect many of the Inflation Reduction Act investments from being repealed. And that is my third and final topic, and then we'll turn over to our final speaker. So we're gearing up for a major fight with the Vance and Trump administration and the Republican-led Congress, who we believe will go after the clean energy and climate investments. The expiring tax bill, which is up next year in 2025, is going to be the biggest fight coming our way in Congress. And we already know Republicans have looked at the Inflation Reduction Act investments and repealing those as a way to pay for extending tax cuts for billionaires. House Republican leaders have made clear they're willing to move straight out of the gate in the first 100 days to lock in those Trump tax cuts and unleash American energy and repeal what they're calling harmful slush funds and policies jammed through in the Inflation Reduction Act. Their words, not mine. And we have a solid playbook to defend these investments. And I want to ask for people's partnership to do this. It's important that we center the economic impact of repealing these real investments that are now making a difference in people's communities through jobs, manufacturing, revitalization, and other investments. It's noteworthy that a majority of the Inflation Reduction Act investments have actually gone to Republican-held districts. And so the organizing and the work to really make the price of repealing these investments is before us. LCV has very strong state affiliates and a number of Republican strongholds like Idaho, Indiana, South Carolina, Nebraska. And we're working with them especially and others to build out the case for these investments being good for jobs, for the economy, and for clean energy freedom. It's also important that we're elevating the stories of the real people that are impacted by repealing these investments. And we look really closely to working with IEC and other partners in doing that. And we have to get back to the on-the-ground organizing and telling our story in earned and paid media, and doing this all in partnership with you and so many others. So in closing, let me just say, I believe that we have to and we must continue the progress on climate action, on good jobs and justice. Thank you, Illinois, for being a bright light in what is going to be a very hard few years ahead. I'm excited to cheer on the local and state progress you will continue to make and draw strength from that. And I'm excited to work with Illinois and state partners and others to slow, stop, and weaken what we have facing us with the Trump Vance administration's attacks on the environment and our democracy. So thank you for inviting me, Jen.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for all of the great work that you're doing. I'm going to bring it over to Angela. And if you can, Angela just has a few slides to share. And if you have questions afterward, she will also be able to answer some of these. So we wanted to tackle some of the pressing questions with the Inflation Reduction Act. And maybe you can give it about 6-7 minutes, Angela, so we can take questions. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jen. And hello, everyone. My name is Angela Xu, and I work in the energy and water programs for the Illinois Environmental Council. I'll be presenting on the specific impacts on Inflation Reduction Act investments in Illinois. So Illinois leads in the movement towards a clean energy future because we passed state-level climate legislation a year before the IRA, and we can and we will continue to implement these policies regardless of who is in the White House. The Climate and Equitable Jobs Act accelerates Illinois' path to 100% renewable energy while centering workers and communities most impacted by the climate crisis. we're already in full momentum of seeing these benefits of the IRA in the United States. And there's hundreds of billions of dollars in private investments, and we're seeing the creation of hundreds of thousands of good clean energy jobs. It would behoove the federal government to not roll back the IRA, and we hope to still receive the remaining funding that is not rolled out yet. In 2023 alone, 3.4 million Americans received $8.4 billion in tax credits for home energy improvements, thanks to the IRA, and 60% of these announced investments are expected to roll out in the next administration. And Trump said that he will terminate the IRA and make significant program budget cuts and rescind any remaining funding. However, the clean energy tax incentives under the IRA would actually bolster American energy independence and domestic manufacturing, which Trump claims to support. And just like Sarah Chifo said, although no Republicans voted for the IRA, the majority of these investments do widely benefit those districts. Republican states account for 58% of these projects, and rolling back the legislation would actually harm the GOP constituencies. House Republicans did send a letter to the House Speaker Johnson in August to support the continued rollout of IRA funds. So completely repealing the IRA would be an uphill battle. They would need majority support from both the House and the Senate, and doing so would expend significant political capital. Because of these reasons, analysts are doubtful that the administration will completely repeal the IRA. And even if there's funding cuts, there's not a projected tremendous hit to the rate of renewable energy deployment. And lastly, the business community is supportive of the continued rollout of the IRA. So with this election, IRA tax credits do have an uncertain future. This includes credits for purchasing heat pumps or the electric vehicle purchase credit or the 45W credit for leasing EVs. The new Congress will have the ability to change, keep, repeal, strengthen, or weaken tax credits. And from a policy perspective, environmental organizations have forecasts from across the board, and the likelihood to change a tax credit will actually depend on the composition of the House, on public and private perception, especially of electric vehicles. But from the perspective of the US Treasury, however, the IRA's historic tax provisions are enshrined in and protected by law. So taxpayers who qualify for tax credits are entitled to claim them, and the IRS will continue to process filings as part of its responsibility to administer the code. The Treasury has worked hard to issue these final rules, and so where final rules have been issued, any future administration looking to change those rules would have to create new legislation, would have to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking, and consider public comment before creating the new final rules. And any future regulations or guidance would need to be consistent with the law. So Illinois has already received a ton of IRA funding, and that will be put to work across the state to expand renewable energy projects, tackle environmental injustices, and increase job opportunities. The US DOE did allocate $263 million to the IEPA, Office of Energy, to administer the home energy programs. As Commissioner Tovar mentioned, we do not expect this funding to be lost because it's already allocated. $5 million has already been awarded for early administration. And we're also seeing significant solar development as well. The IRA has been massively successful for solar. Americans can claim 30% on the residential clean energy credit for this installation, and domestic production and solar installation are an all-time high and continue to accelerate. Solar now accounts for 53% of all new electricity generation capacity and is quickly becoming more affordable. And furthermore, the IRS says that solar production tax credits remain available for projects that start construction by 2030. And the top 10 congressional districts that have invested the most in solar since the passage of the IRA are Republican. Overall, leaders across our state have cemented Illinois' leadership on climate policy, and we will not go backward. In fact, IEC is working with our partners, fellow advocates, and lawmakers across the state to further accelerate our climate and equity goals. We're not slowing down our commitment to a climate resilient future because we will sit in the Oval Office. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela. That was so useful, and folks can get in touch if they have any questions following this as well. We see some great questions in the chat, so I'm going to go at it. I'm going to start with the first one, which is a little bit for us, but I don't know if anybody wants to add to it, which is from James. Do you expect it will be possible to pass key environmental legislation in current veto session at ILGA? What bills are a priority? And I had some questions here, for IEC. We actually, right after this, are going to go and support the ban on CCS in the Mahomet Aquifer. That one is coming up just this afternoon. I think there are some pushes on whether there are ways to get storage specifically and other renewable energy on the ground faster during veto session, and maybe some plastic reduction work. So I'm hopeful, that we can look at ways that we need to address any environmental rollbacks. Anybody want to add anything?
The only thing I would note is that both of our legislative liaisons, Sierra Moody and or Sam Moody and Sierra Wagoner are on, and I think they're going to put their contact info in the chat if anybody wanted to reach out to the agency on where we may be standing with some of the things that would be put forth both in veto, but then also during spring session.
Great. That sounds great. Thanks, James. And so hopefully there's ways, and I know that we're supporting Governor Pritzker in standing up to make Illinois a shining example for both all of our partners in the conservation voter movement of other states, but just nationally. So we want to set that example. So John had a question. The work I do at CNT often relies on many sources of publicly available data sets to create decision-making tools. We are concerned about the possibility of large swaths of data being swept away or politically manipulated. Do you anticipate this at any level? And if so, do you have any suggestions to help guard against this possibility? I'd love to, I know Sarah addressed this a little bit. Maybe Sarah, you could give a sentence here, and then Angela and James, if you have anything specific you're concerned about. Sarah, I know you mentioned the data as a piece. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, great question. So we're working with partners within and outside the federal government to make sure that data sets ranging from everything from clean water to the CGS tools and others, that they are sort of downloaded and made publicly available, so that if the Trump administration wants to sort of remove them, that we don't lose all of that work. So it's a combination of, I would say, partners within and outside the government to make sure that this is done. But open to feedback, ideas, things that we maybe haven't thought of yet that we should be doing.
Yeah, great. Anything, James or Angela, that you're concerned about with respect to data?
I would just say certainly concerned. I think that this is not a surprise. This has happened before. And if I recall, the last time this happened, a number of municipalities published the data that was erased on their own websites, right? States and municipalities did that. So I think that there are a lot of people that are, watching, that are monitoring this. The downloads are happening, and that, the things like the screening tool, the climate and environmental justice screening tool, that, could potentially go away. As Sarah mentioned, there are safeguards in place to make sure that the data remains downloaded. I read an excellent article today by Amy Turner of the Sabin Center, who I regard as she advises the city on many of our climate policies and is just nationally an expert on many things related to climate policy. I'm going to put that in the chat. I think that this is the most comprehensive analysis that I've seen that's already out there, just in terms of where the threats are and where potentially there will be organizations that will continue to monitor and safeguard some of these things. I thought it was a really great read, and I want to make sure that folks see it. So I'll put it in the chat so that folks can read that and learn more.
That's really great. Thanks. Director Jennings, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so the one component I would add is that, there's some design redundancy in how a lot of our state programs operate because of how we have to go to the Pollution Control Board and putting together rules, and how we have to support information that's available on our website, like our EJ mapping tool. And so to that end, as part of our ordinary course of business, is a way to prevent significant changes at the federal level at any point in time from impacting our programs. We typically do some of those mass downloads, and we use the data sets that are historically available to inform our decision making. So to that end, we have this design in place. It's just one that, because of some external factors, we may have to utilize perhaps with some greater frequency. I know one question I saw that I think is related to this is that Illinois is a member of ECOS. It's the Environmental Council of States, which covers every state environmental agency. And so to that end, we've been in longstanding conversations with other state governments about how they approach a variety of these type of exercises, and that'll be continuing to go forward. Over the weekend, I spoke to 15 other state environmental directors and some of the things that we're covering today. And so a lot of the structure that we need at the state level in place to ensure continuity, that our programs are the most protective in the country, is already in place, and we're just continuing to execute that in the most faithful manner possible.
Great. Oh, and thank you, Director. Really appreciate that. I think I'm going to go to this, and I think we covered a little bit here, but Director Jennings, do you have the status of the home energy rebate funds and just anything that you want to say about how we're getting that money in the door and keeping it briefly?
Yeah, and so we, as part of both our federal fiscal year closeouts, as well as just typical program check-ins, I mean, we've been working with both US EPA and Department of Energy to evaluate how quickly we can actually get additional federal money our way, and then and expend it in the most efficient means possible. I mean, those are conversations that are ongoing, but I mean, we're very confident, based on both the feedback we've initially received as well as the way that we're administering our programs, that the money that we already had coming in the door will still continue to be coming, at least as initially identified. I mean, should that change? I mean, one of the components of being responsive to the public is enhanced transparency. And so if it does need to be shifted going forward, I mean, that's the type of thing that we would make known, so that we're just being candid with our stakeholders.
Really great. Okay. Yeah, I think this, if when environmental justice data sets like CEGST are taken offline, how might states like Illinois leverage existing data to ensure enough benefits reach disadvantaged communities, utilize third-party tools, or maybe develop your own similar tools? I do want to say a piece here, and I don't know if others want to comment on environmental justice. We have the Illinois Solar for All through Climate and Equitable Jobs Act has created maps that are available. And of course, like the data sets, they created them, those may go away, but we have a lot of that data within the state. We have our own mapping tool within the state. It's not necessarily something that's used outside of Solar for All, but we do have a model led and created by environmental justice communities. So does anybody else want to comment on any of the EJ data sets?
One item that I think some folks on may already be aware of is that the agency was prior to the last few months already working to update the criteria that we use to populate our EJ mapping tool. And the additional criteria would include many of the data sets that are available at the federal level. And so we were already engaged in extracting those data sets, as well as other publicly available information, to best inform the way that our EJ programs proceed. And so, I mean, should data like that no longer be available from US EPA as the primary source, at least here, we would still have those information points available to help drive how our programs are operating.
Really great.
And we, of course, have an analysis at the city level, our cumulative impacts assessment. I will drop the link in the chat so that folks have access to that data set as well.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for the work you're doing on those issues. Will solar renewable energy certificates still be available through 2030? I think, Angela, you covered a little of that. Do you want to, Angela, should you want to answer that one?
Sure. So with solar, we do not expect those rollbacks to take place based on the analysis that we have seen, because solar has been so widely successful, especially in those Republican districts. So the answer is yes, but we will be an eye on that.
Great. Okay, thank you. This was a question redirected from the chat. If US EPA and NOA are gutted, can Illinois continue on course? Some same on climate change and renewable clean energy if those are defunded. And I think there is a piece here of just, we should have concern over, we've worked so hard, especially with the IEPA, to rebuild, to get to it's 700 staff people, but it was an agency at 1,300. So, I know we're still working on that funding, and I don't know if anybody wants to share their thoughts there, but that is a concern of what would happen with federal funding and how we can block that.
As a general matter, when we prepare for our annual meetings with US EPA, we run through a variety of funding scenarios because we have seen in recent years a decrease in some of our core program funding lines from the federal government. And so how we approach that is in a structured manner, working to ensure that we have other supplemental funding available, or that we're able to have some state overlap to ensure that we're able to continue to maintain program growth. Depending on where cuts come at the federal level, that can have a different type of effect on individual state programs. How we see things going forward, though, is that we will be able to continue to operate our programs as we had anticipated, irrespective of what occurs at the federal level. Now, years down the line, it's hard to tell what we would need to do, and we're considering those issues. But for the immediate future, there should be a lot of confidence that the work that our agency does will be able to continue as it would have, independent of any electoral activity, because of the steps that both our program staff and our CFO and his team have taken to protect the programs that we need to maintain going forward.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we are getting towards the end here. So maybe I can ask a combined question, and I'm going to end talking a little bit about what we have ahead of us. So I'll cover CETA and the pieces of legislation. I think James talked a little bit about how he's working with other states. Do we want to maybe talk about lead service lines and the likelihood that the changes to the lead and copper rule make it? So does anybody wanna cover any thoughts that we have there on what we'll need to do with lead service line replacement, being the state that has 1/8 of all lead service lines in the nation?
So I can provide the
Thank you,
state
James.
perspective, and I know Angela will have some thoughts from the city level. So as I noted earlier, we have a very robustly resourced state revolving fund, and we have been using some of that funding to be able to cover the tens of millions that we have put out for lead service line replacement. That would continue. That fund is bonded, it's well resourced, and so consequently, that type of work will be able to continue going forward. The lead and copper rule components that have been adopted at the federal level are the type of rules that we would, just as part of our ordinary course of business, work to weave into the board's regulations. And so to that end, that's something we would have always done. We would continue to do that, independent of any federal efforts to pull that back or to change it. And so that was the plan 6 months ago, to be able to weave this into applicable state law, and that remains the plan. And we've got both technical and legal staff who are prepared to undertake that.
Really great, really great. And a new Bureau of Water director is really thinking about these things, so thank you. Angela, anything you want to?
Yeah, I'll just say very quickly, because I know that we're at the end. I'll just say that I know with the new lead and copper rule accelerated our timeline at the city. The draft gave us 40 years to make the full transition, and then in the final, we were given 20 years. We've also had a leadership change at the city of Chicago and have a commissioner, Randy Connor, who has conveyed his deep commitment to solving this issue. They've already rolled out a number of different strategies, and had, prior to the threat of federal funding being repealed, received a sizable award from the EPA's revolving loan fund. I know he's dedicated and has reassured us that he wants to continue the momentum forward. So that is, what we are moving with. We are under the 20-year timeline now, and we are moving at that pace to try to eliminate lead service lines.
Awesome. That's awesome. So one last piece, this is just very quick. I don't know, Director or Commissioner, are there any places where folks can look for jobs with government if they want to get involved that way? And I say that because I always am looking for how I can help Director Jennings fill the spaces.
Yeah, I will. So I'll go ahead. I'll put the link in to our job posting board in the chat. In addition to that, in addition to what's available on here, I mean, we will continue to have new postings upcoming. We've cleared a bureaucratic holdup that actually delayed some of our postings for a bit. But this is going to be your best avenue to be able to apply to work here. Beyond that, the Central Management Services, the agency that handles most of the transactional work for state government, is going to be rolling out a combination of both digital media and video spots highlighting individual agency job opportunities. And we were among the agencies that have been identified as good candidates for that. And so there will sometime either within the next couple of weeks or at latest early next year be some video spots highlighting jobs that are available at the agency and then what those jobs actually entail.
Well, that's really exciting. Those pieces here. Great. Well, so I think I'm gonna, oh, Angela, do you wanna?
Oh, no, we are on a hiring freeze. So I was just going to remind folks that the city is on a hiring freeze through to the end of the year. We do anticipate and hope to restart our hiring in fiscal year 2025. So we do have a number of unfilled positions, some project management, policy analyst position, and a couple of others. And we will be, hopefully posting come January.
Great. So thank you, Angela. And I just want to thank everybody on here. We'll try to follow up to answer some of the extra questions that were in there, but I know I got to go over to the Capitol, and hopefully our Mahomet Aquifer CCS ban is moving forward today. This has been really fantastic. I want to close out here by saying that while so many things remain uncertain, at IEC, we're staying the course. We'll be the building power for people in the environment by leaning into our unique role as the convener of Illinois' environmental movement in pursuit of strong, equitable policy solutions to our greatest environmental challenges. And sure, our work just got much more difficult, but it's as important as ever. I'm hopeful about the environmental movement because of supporters like you, because of all the people who have attended today, and because of environmental champions we have elected to local and state offices. And the folks like Director Jennings and Commissioner Tovar, who those environmental champions have appointed, who are experienced, great leaders, who want to work together with us. Because of our work together, Illinois can remain a leader in climate progress and environmental protection. And so if you can, please consider making a donation to support IEC's work. We've got annual memberships that are $50, or if you're part of an organization, you can become an affiliate member of IEC. We're going to put the link in the chat that helps us keep this valuable program going. But a final thank you to our panelists today and for all of you for being engaged. For folks who are fired up and ready to plug in, we're going to be hosting our first lobby day at the state capitol on January 7th, working on the Clean and Equitable Transportation Act and all the pieces to ensure transit funding, electrification, transportation choices, working on energy through the Clean and Reliable Grid Act, and talking about decarbonization through the Clean and Healthy Buildings Act. Everyone who attended today is going to get an email inviting you to register, inviting you to contact your lawmakers. We're going to need to show up in force, so I hope that that'll be a piece where you join us. But so excited to have so many people interested today, and so excited by our panelists and what our work will be together. I think that this has made me feel a little better to be surrounded by people who are all moving in the same direction. So thank you so much. Thanks for your leadership. And we'll keep in touch, and we'll give you opportunities and let you know what you can do to make a difference. So thanks, everybody. Thank you.